Right here on the side of the interstate where they have dumped him, Congressman Garret Graves, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. How about you?
I could not be any better. Gorgeous day going into the Memorial Day weekend. Fantastic. We're out here to talk some traffic, and you've been passionate about traffic in the city that you're from for a long time. So right now, let's start our conversation with this College Drive flyover loop. Tell me what that's going to do, and it's all behind us, and kind of a completion date that they're targeting.
Well, look, first, I think it's important to note that, look, this is something that should have been done decades and decades ago. So on the one hand, it's exciting that finally we've got dirt turning, things are moving in the right direction, but it's also kind of frustrating because just think if we were able to take advantage of the nearly 2 years when people were home for COVID to a large degree, and we would have had much less traffic and complexity in trying to manage all of this. So
why didn't that happen?
Well, it didn't happen, and I'll give you my 2 cents. It didn't happen because this really wasn't addressed with the urgency it should have been addressed under. But look, Johnny, to be clear, we can go back and point to governors for decades and decades back that didn't properly prioritize this. But the fact that we're talking about this in year 7 of a governor, we're talking about a new bridge that's probably going to get kicked to the next governor. It really is unfortunate, but I'm going to say it again. I'm going to try and stay positive here. The fact that we've got all this going on right now is fantastic. It is going to help clean up this whole interconnection between I-10 and I-12. I think we've got some other improvements that we're continuing to work on to see if we can further help with some of the connections, actually getting people off these roads, because what ends up happening right here in Baton Rouge is this is largely our main street. This is our main street. You have people that get on at College and get off at Acadian or Essen or what have you, and that's not what interstates are really designed to do.
Risking life and limb to move over, especially on the weekend.
No, you're exactly right. And look, you can look at the safety numbers. I mean, you do have increased accidents. You have people getting hurt. This is not a safe way to live. And I'll say it again, traffic models showed decades ago that this was going to happen. This isn't just a corridor, connecting downtown to O'Neill and Millerville. This is connecting California to Florida. I mean, this is a major east-west corridor for the United States, a major trade corridor, as we're going to see 18-wheelers, like on cue right now, boom, 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 all these 18-wheelers coming along here. So this is something that's absolutely critical for our region, but also for the nation.
I've been in Baton Rouge since 1979. I'm from the Houston area originally. I covered a city council meeting and when I was a kid in college, just as a stick in front of a city councilman, and there was a councilman that had a board and easel in 1980 showing a proposed loop that they wanted to present to the legislature back then. And now that land that was the proposal is all developed now. Nobody wants it in their backyard. But I also saw a national televised program, I think it was the Travel Network, where they were interviewing truckers all over the country. And this lady was interviewing a trucker that pulled tanks, liquids. And she was trying to see if he had any uncomfortable situations with his equipment. She said, "Is there anything that ever makes you uncomfortable?" And he said, and I quote, "If I can plan the trip, I will never go through Baton Rouge, Louisiana in the daytime."
Wow. I mean, look, it's amazing. I don't know if you've traveled much to small towns, but look, you go to these small towns and sometimes you'll see these T-shirts there where it'll say New York, Milan, Paris, Bunkie, and so the top four worst traffic cities in America: New York, LA, Miami, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I mean, it's like the T-shirt. It is unbelievable, and what this ends up doing is it ends up undermining our efforts to try and lure economic development here, to try and lure people here, because nobody wants to sit in traffic. People come to towns this size because of the convenience, because you can get around, but we have really complicated that by being so slow to make the investments in infrastructure like we need here.
But this is one of the major areas where east-west, coast to coast gets bottlenecked. That bridge can't come too soon. What are your thoughts on the new bridge? What are your thoughts on turning a shovel for the first time? When is this all going to happen?
Well, so new bridge, look, I want to commend the governor for agreeing to attempt to put $500 million aside, which we know the bridge is going to be substantially more, but it's a good down payment. It helps us at the federal level because then we can show that there's a clear commitment from the state of Louisiana. But I'm also very bothered that, we were talking I heard people talking during the campaign. this governor and other candidates in the original campaign for governor 6-7 years ago, talking about how a new bridge was going to be a priority, and here we are 7 years later, and we're virtually in the same spot. The fact that this much time has passed and they've narrowed it to 30 different options, I mean, you've got to be kidding me. We can give a kid a crayon, they can figure this out. The good news, I'll say it again, they've made a down payment. It looks like the legislature is going to protect a good bit of that money, but my guess is right now, best case scenario, we're still probably 4 to 5 years away from actually putting stakes in the ground, turning dirt on a new bridge. But I want to say this, Johnny, I am absolutely convinced that we are going to get a new bridge. This is one of the most important bottlenecks, one of the worst bottlenecks in the nation, one of the highest priority investments for that I-10 corridor, and I'm convinced we're going to get a bridge. And whether we have to hold garage sales, bake sales, and flip couch cushions over to pay for it, I think you have people in this region that are willing to do just that. They know how important this is, and this isn't just a convenience project. This is a safety project. We have lives being lost, particularly on the west side of the bridge as a result of the bottleneck, but we've got to continue making these investments and looking forward, because something that's really important to keep in mind, look, that Whiskey Bay at Chaffalaya Basin crossing, that's all an elevated roadway. Going down to New Orleans, we have the same thing. We have the 4-mile bridge and the spillway, elevated roadways. It is going to be very expensive and challenging, but as we're looking at traffic trends, we've got to start planning and investing in improvements or alternatives for those routes as well. Otherwise, we're going to just be moving the bottleneck from right here to right there to right there, and those aren't options we can be pursuing right now.
Well, I'm so passionate about the bridge and about a loop that probably won't happen. I could go on for 30 minutes about that, but I do want to move on to a couple of other projects. The Piku Lane project, that's coming along, and that's going to really relieve, I'm thinking, people that go down to Highland Road and get off to access areas.
Look, just once again, to keep people positive and optimistic on this, we had people for decades and decades saying that the Washington Street exit, never going to see a configuration change. We've got that new Terrace Street exit that's open today. You see construction here. We've made major progress on Piku. I'm sure everybody who's driving between Segan Lane and Highland Road on I-10, they have seen that reconfiguration of the Piku Lane coming over the interstate. The reason that's been done is to facilitate this new exit project, to make sure we have more capacity there. And I know in the afternoons when Highland Road's backing up, that exit's backing up and blocking the right lane of I-10, that is going to be a very much utilized exit when it opens up, and I think it's going to relieve a lot of pressure. So once again, things that should have been done decades ago, we're seeing progress, and even the new lane on I-10, I mean, we can celebrate that one as well between Highland Road and the Prairieville Dutchtown exit, a new lane there, so continuing to move forward, but my gosh, we've got decades and decades of inaction to make up for it.
Yeah, and I try to talk on the air a lot, probably more so than any traffic reporter, about visit these businesses that are in the construction routes. This is a temporary problem for a long-term solution, and the I-10 widening project, I'm starting to get questions about. Can you speak on that for a minute?
Look, I-10 widening, we all know such a critical project, but what's going to end up happening is, as you know, you got the elevated section that as soon as you cross over College, it goes up, and when you're headed toward downtown, they are going to be completely taking down, for example, the eastbound route, and going to have all traffic on the westbound route, which means we're going to be losing 1/2 of all of our capacity. I told folks the other day, I think that hoverboards and horses are good investments right now. It is going to be very, very challenging in order to get through some of these areas for a few years, but it is going to be pain for long-term gain that we're going to see more capacity. We're going to see better configurations of roads, and obviously much better flow through here as well.
Have they talked about a date when that's going to kind of start?
They are probably about $1 billion short right now on being able to fully finance this thing. So what they've talked about doing, and obviously doing this in stages, let's take some of the parts that we can afford right now, so reconfiguring some of the interface at the 10-12 split and where we are right now is going to be the first project. I think that you're going to end up seeing some of the opening of the new lanes probably within about 3 years, but keep in mind, that just means that they're going to build a new eastbound route to move all the traffic over to that one, deconstruct the westbound route, and so we're not going to see the full benefits of this thing for probably somewhere in the 5 to 7 year range.
I often said that when Katrina happened, we had an overnight population growth, and when all the dust settled, some of that population remained as a permanent stay. I feel we've outgrown our infrastructure before Katrina. Is that an accurate statement, and will we ever catch up?
You're exactly right. Traffic models showed it, not just traffic infrastructure, flood protection infrastructure didn't really stay on track with development as well. I do think we can catch up, but it is going to take a sustained investment. We're going to have to keep this on the front burner. We cannot allow it to slide back. And so I am confident that we can actually catch up and even get ahead. But it is going to have to take us keeping this on the front burner, continuing to make this a priority and making the right investments, which in some cases means very challenging political decisions to decide that we're going to prioritize roads over some other things. But this is a fundamental need, and it is strangling our economy and our community, and it's simply not safe.
I have family in the Houston area. I mentioned I grew up in that area. They have toll tags on their cars. What about tolls? I don't think we understand them here like they do in some of the bigger cities, but you don't stop at the toll booth much anymore. You got a tag, it reads you as you drive, speed limit speeds. Have you heard anything about tolls? Could we do something and pay for it with the tolls?
So, Johnny, that's a great question. So let's keep in mind that roads are supposed to be paid for under a user fee model. That user fee right now, and has been around for decades, is you pay a tax at the gas pump. So when you buy a gallon of gas, they're both state taxes that go to roads and federal taxes that go to roads. But what's happened over time is, as a result of new technology like hybrids and electric vehicles, you have hybrids that are getting discounts. You have electric vehicles that are freeloaders on this user system right now. You also have a greater efficiency of vehicles, so cars are paying a lower user fee to drive a mile now because of fuel efficiency. So the bottom line is, that user fee model is no longer one that really reflects the need for investment. So migrating to some other type of user fee system is something that absolutely makes sense if people want to have that trade-off for paying a different model that's going to allow us to keep up and then getting the convenience of more efficient transportation features through our community. So that is something that absolutely needs to be on the table. One thing about dedicated toll routes that I do think is important, if we're going to do that, it's got to be on new capacity, new features only, and allow people to continue to drive on these other kind of legacy roads that don't have tolls dedicated there.
Oh, I totally agree. And you really can't compare Houston with Baton Rouge, but Houston's got 3 loops.
You're right, you're a lot better.
Oh, you were a lot better, yeah, thank you. Houston's got 3 loops. Tyler, Texas has a loop. Lake Charles has a bypass. Shreveport's got a bypass. Will we ever see a bypass or a loop in my lifetime?
You know, Johnny, there was a project that was proposed years ago called the Bump Project that was going to use the excess capacity on the old bridge, where you were going to be able to come across there, tie into Airline Highway, and ultimately come into I-12. Keep in mind, the majority of traffic at the 10-12 split actually goes on I-12, not to I-10 to New Orleans. They're continuing on that east route. So one thing that you could do, and I do think we should keep this on the drawing board to continue thinking through. You think about it, we're going to build a new bridge that's going to be south of the old bridge, so we're going to have a new alignment coming in. You potentially build this bump project at some point and upgrade the old bridge as well as Airline Highway. You start seeing what looks like a circle at some point. I think something else that needs to be done is a better connection between, for example, the Gonzales area up toward Walker, doing a connection between I-10 and I-12 in that area. So again, you're going to get to 320 degrees of 360-degree circle. And so I do think that it's going to make sense to move in that direction, but you nailed it earlier. You've got a lot of development in some of these key areas, particularly that last part of the circle I talked about, that is going to make it very challenging. So one of the things I think we've got to think about is additional investments, for example, to Florida Boulevard. No regrets, huge investments need to be made in Nicholson, LA 30, and what this does is it creates alternative routes to the interstate that certainly can help us through construction, but also going to help facilitate long-term growth. In the case of Highway 30, that should have been done 10 or 20 years ago as well. And then over on the west side, additional investments to LA 1 over there, because the last thing in the world we want to do is build a new bridge and take people from a traffic jam on the west side to a traffic jam on the east side. We've got to make sure we have the roads there to facilitate people actually moving.
Yeah, we don't want to move the bottleneck and create the problem just a little further down. You know?
That's right.
It'd be fine with me if it was past my route of travel, do it. I know you've got a busy schedule. Your staff is here with us. Thank you so much for coming out to the project here in College Drive at the 1012 merge or split, depending on which way you're going. Anything else we need to you want to address? That it's your time.
I'll just tell you that we're actually headed right now to Ascension Parish to go meet with a coalition that's advocating for LA 30 investments, and so we're just going to continue talking about alternative ways of addressing this problem. The interstate's critical, but we've got to keep in mind we've got a lot of these other routes, U.S. highways, Florida Boulevard, Airline Highway, LA 30, LA 1, a lot of other options that are there, and we cannot forget about those because those are going to be key alternatives for us as we move forward.
Garret Graves, awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Johnny. Appreciate it.
Take care. Garret Graves, everybody.